Hey, so welcome to the 2x eCommerce podcast and hope you all are keeping well in 2022. Given that we're at the start of the year, I decided to focus this episode on macro trends you should be aware of that will enable you get better results in 2022. This is why I invited Mike Shapaker, the CMO of ChannelAdvisor, to share insights from their multi-channel platform that processes billions of dollars worth of GMV, or gross merchant value, for thousands of retailers each year. ChannelAdvisor is an industry-leading multi-channel product listing and management platform, or a channel management vendor. So on this episode, Mike and I discuss a lot of things. We discuss big trends in 2021 likely to persist in 2022. And if marketplace expansion is part of your 2022 strategy, the marketplaces you must list in, I must say some of his answers will surprise you. Trends in privacy, funnel consolidation on social channels as well as marketplace platforms, and how traditional retailers seem to have woken up to the reality of becoming marketplace platforms in order to stay relevant to both their customers and potential new customers. It was a very insightful conversation I had with Mike. He is full of insights, and it is just interesting from the perspective of maybe a digital native retailer or direct-to-consumer direct-to-consumer e-commerce retailer to understand the nuances and the opportunity from marketplace, selling. And that is why I really wanted to bring, Mike and someone of his caliber, giving the data, commerce advice, ChannelAdvisor is privy to. It could potentially, give you better insights towards just informing your product expansion strategy in 2022. So voila, there you go. Enjoy this conversation and I shall catch you on the other side. Cheers. Hey Mike, welcome to the 2x eCommerce podcast.
Thank you, Kunle, for having me.
Brilliant. Could you, for listeners that don't know much about ChannelAdvisor, would you mind just explaining, what you guys do from a top level standpoint? I know you work on marketplaces, but it would be great if you explain.
Okay, yeah, sure. So just at the very top level, ChannelAdvisor is a leading software as a service based provider of e-commerce solutions. And so our main solution is a multi-channel commerce platform that helps our customers really streamline all their channel e-commerce operations, and it helps them expand to new channels and then optimize the performance and improve the performance of the channels they're on. And really the easiest way to think about what we do is to think about our experience as consumers. So, before there was online and we wanted something, when I was a kid, we had to go to a store to buy that or order from a catalog. And then, of course, the internet came along and e-commerce, and now there's almost an infinite number of channels. There's the direct to brand website, there's retail websites, marketplaces, search engines, and then also all social media. And there's lots of research out there from Harvard Business Review, Google, and others that show that about 75% of consumers use multiple channels during the buying process. So as a brand, trying to reach those consumers where they're discovering products, where they're researching, where they're buying and shopping for products, means you need to cover a lot of channels. And if you're global, you need to do that across geographies. So that can be pretty complicated to manage for a brand or a retailer. So instead of myriad individual integrations with all of these platforms, you can have one integration with ChannelAdvisor, and we handle all of that complexity, for the brand. And then we also have solutions to help improve performance on those channels. So that's really what we do and why we do it, to really help brands eliminate the complexity of connecting to all of these channels. All of them have different formats of technical integrations, different data formats. We can help make all that easier.
Right. So you really just enable multi-channel, selling for all sorts of, retailers, whether you're a direct-to-consumer retailer or you're a retail brand looking to expand into new channels, essentially. And the landscape has certainly changed. And one of the reasons I really wanted to have you guys on at the start of the year was to kind of give us an overview of what 2022 would look like from not just a multi-channel standpoint, but for e-commerce and retail in general. Before we jump into that, I'm not asking you to give predictions, but this is really a data-driven perspective from your end. What were the big trends in 2022 you saw at ChannelAdvisor? I mean, billions or at least hundreds of millions of transactions are passing through ChannelAdvisor on an annual basis. And so you see where the monies are actually flowing. So what trends do you see, or did you see in 2021 that will persist in 2022?
Right. So ChannelAdvisor, we have operations globally, and we've done a lot of consumer surveys globally. Our principal operations are in the U.S. and in Europe and London and Germany, and then we have operations in Australia. And so, we work with sellers all over the world, really, that sell on more than hundreds of marketplaces. So yes, we do have a lot of transactional data coming through our system. And, one thing we've seen, I think, not just in our system, but if you read all the press, is e-commerce, right? So during the pandemic, when stores closed, everybody flocked online that already wasn't online to buy goods. And, there was probably a pretty standard trend line, pretty linear line of e-commerce adoption over the last 10, 20 years. And all of a sudden in 2020, that trend line jumped straight up as everybody went online due to the pandemic. Coming into 2021, I thought personally, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a little bit of negative growth in 2021 as things begin to open back up. But what we see in the government data and in our data is actually e-commerce, certainly not the same growth rates as 2020, but in 2021, e-commerce held its own and still grew. So it looks like e-commerce is here to stay. And, we can talk a little bit about the consumer survey data later, but a lot of the things that people tried in 2020 seem to have kept up in 2021 and may seem more permanent, than maybe we initially thought during the middle of the pandemic. So
interesting. Does ChannelAdvisor have a Shopify app? Do you have a Shopify app?
We do not have a Shopify app,
Okay.
But we do, Shopify is a partner, and we do have sellers that, that are on Shopify and then use ChannelAdvisor to help expand from there into other channels, marketplaces, dropship channels, advertising, etc.
The reason I'm asking is that in Q4, there was certainly a lot of growth in Q4 this year. It was not as huge as the prior Q4. But what I'm trying to get to is more around the activity, where the source of growth. So Amazon is an obvious, probably answer to it. So what channels did you see the most active or just most activity in general in Q4, particularly of 2021?
Yeah, we seem to see activity across the board. So, obviously when you look at marketplaces, for example, you mentioned Amazon. Amazon is enormous. And so, if you look at percentage growth on Amazon compared to percentage growth on other channels that aren't as large, and these are their published numbers, you may not see Amazon growing as fast in terms of percentage as maybe Shopify did or some of the others like that. But Amazon is so big, just a percentage of growth is hundreds of percentage of growth for all their smaller competitors. But in general, we saw growth pretty much across the board in a lot of the marketplaces and advertising channels that we support. I can say that one thing we've noticed is what we call maybe the longer tail of marketplaces. Globally, people think of Amazon and eBay of two of the bigger or larger marketplaces, and in the U.S., Walmart has a large marketplace. When you look outside of those, that longer tail for us, we've seen our customers growing significantly on that longer tail. And again, some of it is the law of large numbers, right? Some of those are not as large as the Amazons or the eBays, and so it's maybe easy to show a little bit faster growth. But it's clear that brands are adopting channels. They're doing significant business on the big channels, and they're adopting channels beyond that.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's get into 2022. Your predictions from a ChannelAdvisor standpoint. What major changes do you think are going to be just realized in 2022?
Yeah, so I think I talked about e-commerce. We think that is here to stay. The numbers are going to the growth numbers may look a little funny, just as we kind of get through this period of year-over-year comps with all the pandemic activity. But clearly, consumers have adopted e-commerce, and we think that's here to stay. There's been a lot of news in 2021 about supply chain issues. So that's the whole supply chain, not just the last mile, but all the way, sourcing goods, crossing the oceans and whatnot. All the experts seem to suggest that that's going to continue well into 2022. I've seen some even suggest 2023 before some of these are ironed out. So we think that'll be something that brands and retailers have to deal with as we move forward. But hopefully over time it will get a little better.
What about inflationary pressures? So obviously, cost of shipping, cost of raw materials are affecting, what consumers pay for goods. That didn't really reflect on 2021's numbers on retail and e-commerce in general. But do you think consumers will start to have a strain in 2022 if supply chains around the world are still going to be constrained?
I think eventually it could have an impact. I am by no means a macroeconomist, so I'd hate to say too much about that. But from what you read in the papers, there's the supply chain issues. There's the inflationary pressure. There's also been a large amount of pent-up savings that consumers have that's maybe outweighed some of the inflationary pressure. So consumers have still been going strong because of those built-up savings, which they have from not doing travel, not going out to eat as much during the pandemic. Now, as those savings maybe bleed down, then the inflationary pressure may take its toll. I unfortunately myself have to buy a car, so I'm looking for a used car, and it's the exact wrong time to be doing that right now. So I'm feeling the pain myself of inflation.
Okay. What will be your next big trend in 2022 you'll be expecting?
Yeah, so I think in 2021 we saw an increase in activity around privacy and regulatory actions against some of the larger tech platforms. So maybe the biggest news in 2021 from this perspective was Apple and some of the changes they made in iOS to increase the level of privacy. So we, as consumers, have to opt in to whether we want platforms tracking us. And then I think you saw in some of the results from Facebook and others that they said it did have a little bit of impact on their business. So that is that's a trend that we see continuing, I think, into 2022. And I think that has some downstream effects. So you hear a lot about brands and customer data platforms as people trying to control more first-party data. So I think that's there's more and more brands looking into those type of platforms that can control some of their data, and then you see more retailers offering their own advertising platforms. So retail media is another big trend that we see. Amazon obviously established Amazon advertising a number of years ago, and that has been a huge success for Amazon. I think maybe over the last 12 months, about $31 billion in revenue for them. And they've it started out as product specific, but they've added Amazon. They've added brand advertising, display advertising. We've seen lots of other retailers start to offer this, and a lot of our clients start to adopt some of those platforms. So retail media, we think, will continue to be a big one. Social platforms. So initially, those were branding, platforms, a way to get your brand out there. But more and more of these platforms are offering ways to, try to provide for the full funnel. Things like Instagram checkout are allowing people to discover a product and then buy it with just a couple of clicks of the mouse. There's Facebook shops. There's TikTok has some shopping partnerships with Shopify. So as those social platforms are going full funnel, we see some of maybe the lower funnel platforms also moving up the funnel. I mentioned Amazon starting to offer more broad display type advertising, experimenting with live streaming and things of that nature. So I think the big e-commerce channels are trying to cover more of the funnel, and I think that trend will continue. And then finally, another trend we've seen in 2021 and we think will continue in 2022 is more and more retailers becoming marketplaces themselves. And they're doing this to, because it's a way to offer more selection for their consumers without having to own all of that inventory. So, and also, again, following Amazon's lead and the success Amazon has had, with being a third-party marketplace, lots of other retailers are adopting that platform.
So there's going to be an even longer tail with more retailers, trying to warm at, the situation from a marketplace standpoint.
Absolutely, yes. And we support. I think we support more than 200, 250 marketplaces and channels now. So we just see that continuing to grow.
Are you activating any new geos and any new countries?
We are. We do activate new geos over time. I can't think off the top of my head which are the most recent, but we do have on our website we have a channels we support resource that you can go and actually pick a country that you may be interested in selling in, and you can see what channels we support in those countries. Okay. And we do have we have some great case studies on our site. Just as you mentioned, new countries. Just for example, we signed up with a Turkish brand, clothing apparel brand, a number of years back, and they've actually used. I think they were big in maybe Turkey and in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and they've actually used marketplaces to expand into Western Europe and a number of channels there. Specifically, Zalando has been a big part of that success, and some others. So, geographic expansion is a big benefit of marketplaces for a brand. It's a way to maybe test the waters without setting up a full infrastructure in those regions.
Interesting, Mike. Okay, so this is unashamedly a direct-to-consumer e-commerce, podcast. We preach direct-to-consumer. That being said, we preach opportunity. Now, in 2022, just using a use case, a typical use case here. Pretend we're a 10 million GMV e-commerce D2C brand. We've only sold exclusively D2C. We're using social channels, and a marketing manager now is listening, trying to figure out, okay, what next? What next? What channels should we activate? And let's just pretend that this particular D2C company is based in the US or the UK. What channels would you suggest they start testing, in Q1, Q2, in order to just, expand, their channels and their offerings, to a wider market?
Mm-hmm. So it's, without knowing category and everything else, it's hard to say exactly specific channels, but I think marketplaces provide an opportunity to reach consumers that you can't reach yourself through your website. So direct to consumer, in a perfect world for direct to consumer brand, everybody in the world that they wanted as customers would come directly to their website, whether that be organically or whether that be through an ad. And their advertising strategy would be brilliant if they could figure out how to do that. But the world is not perfect, and there's only so many consumers you can reach trying to do it yourself. And so that's where some of these channels come to play. So when you look at marketplaces, obviously there's the big broad marketplaces that are almost like shopping malls with everything in it: the Amazons, the eBays, the Walmarts, the Bol.com over in the Netherlands. There's lots of examples. Otto over there in Germany. Those are a way to reach a broad audience, and the benefit for a direct-to-consumer brand of trialing some of these marketplaces is now they're in front of tens or maybe hundreds of millions of more consumers than they otherwise would have been through the traffic they can afford to acquire. So the broad, if the products are amenable to it, the broad, platforms like the Amazons of the world can get them out in front of a lot of consumers. Now, depending on the category, there are also very category specific marketplaces. So if this was an apparel brand you were talking about, Zalando is a big apparel marketplace, and then there are many apparel focused marketplaces
ASOS
globally.
marketplace, yeah.
Yep. So there's lots of opportunity there, and then depending on the strategy, some brands use marketplaces for their full catalog. Typically, maybe larger brands might experiment with certain marketplaces for returns or V-stock. So it also depends on the product strategy a little bit.
Yeah.
Some companies do product launches on marketplaces. So without getting into very specific details on a specific brand, it's hard to give an exact set of channels. But based on the category, the type of customer they're trying to reach, the type of product they're trying to sell, and the geographies, there's probably many marketplaces where you can get out there, test the waters, and acquire consumers you can never do on your own.
Absolutely. It's quite nuanced in terms of, just ironing out a specific strategy. You really need to get more data points and understand the strategy, the background strategy. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Last time I checked, in the States and the UK, Amazon was accounting for 44 to 45 cents to a dollar, or pennies to a pound spent on e-commerce, consumer e-commerce. Is this still the case in 2022? And do you see this actually growing in 2022?
Well, without all the data, it's hard for me to say exactly what their market share is. But if you believe the publications, in certain countries like the US and the UK, it may be as high as 40%. Some may argue it's 30-something%. I think it depends on how you do the math. But there's no doubt that in certain countries they are the largest player in e-commerce. I did mention that some of our long tail marketplaces have been growing faster. And that's the law of large numbers.
Yeah.
But I think there's room for Amazon to do what Amazon is doing, and for some of these other marketplaces to have success with their consumer bases and their customers. So, who knows what will continue in terms of Amazon's market share, but I think there's room for everybody to succeed, and we've seen that.
Okay. And then before I let you go, you talked about shoppable media. Do you want to just explain what shoppable media is from a multi-channel standpoint?
Yeah. So, I know you focus on direct-to-consumer brands on this podcast. Many times as brands get larger, they actually end up also in retail stores. And then certainly you have your big brands, or, they have a multi-channel strategy and they're in all the retailers, and they have direct-to-consumer. So with shoppable media solutions, that allows a brand to, with traffic that's either on their website or interacting with their advertising, whether that be social advertising, display advertising, or other, digital campaigns, really any digital campaign. A consumer can interact with that digital campaign, maybe click on an ad, and shoppable media allows the brand to make that ad shoppable in terms of that click doesn't necessarily just have to come back to the brand's website. It can present the consumer with all of the retailers that have that product in stock. So the brand's website may be one of those, but the benefit of something like this is, maybe the brand does want to bring that traffic back to the website, and that ad is out there running, but their website becomes out of stock with that product. Well, that click can then automatically route to another retailer with that product in stock, or it can pull up an interstitial that allows the consumer to choose among their favorite retailers to go and purchase that product. So, not every consumer wants to buy direct from a brand for a variety of reasons. They may have a favorite retailer, they may have loyalty programs, whatever the reason may be. Shoppable Media provides an opportunity to present consumers with options, so those consumers can then go and purchase with their preferred retailer. The benefits are it really smooths that path to purchase for a consumer. So they do that click, and if it's out of stock, then they're blocked. Or if they don't know where to buy it, if it's just an ad and they don't know where to buy it, they're blocked. If you give them the right choices, they can then go find and buy that product. It also helps improve those brand retailer relationships, because the brands are then sending hot leads to the retailers, and it promotes channel diversity too. So it allows the consumers to know, like, oh, I can actually go buy this in my favorite shop down the street or whatnot.
Yeah, and it could also probably give you more insights as to the retailers, customers are gravitating towards, and then you could potentially just, put a bit more attention into that particular channel to further optimize, performance on there, I guess.
Absolutely. So, with the data, a brand can see for specific categories and specific products, which retailers are the most popular, for the consumers that are coming to my ads or coming to my site. So there's a lot of benefits for everyone through this type of solution.
So does this feed into what's termed Amazon local selling?
Amazon local selling is actually something a little bit different. So when you think of Amazon, when you buy something from Amazon, you're presented with options. My 2-day shipping or my 1-day shipping, or you can basically get it right away. Or you can wait a little bit and get it, sometimes they give digital credits for that. Amazon allows sellers to have their inventory shipped to Amazon, and using the Fulfillment by Amazon program, Amazon will deliver that for you. Or sellers can, if they meet the performance metrics, can deliver that product on their own as well. So from a seller point of view, there's also options for how do you get that product to the consumer when they buy it. Amazon local selling adds yet another option, and that other option is the ability to go pick it up in a local store. So buy online, pick up in store, or click and collect, or whatever you want to call it, or have that local store deliver it through their own kind of network locally. So it's a way to bring if you're a brand or a retailer with brick and mortar locations, and whether you sell online or not already, it's a way to maybe get involved in Amazon's ecosystem a little bit, get involved in front of Amazon's audience, and attract people to your stores, through the pickup process.
So are the results, do the search results sort of have a label, like a local, pickup label, in the same way, you have the Amazon Prime, or, 2-day shipping or same-day shipping tag on the listings?
In the product detail page itself, when you're looking at the product detail page, as long as you're within the range, if you're a consumer within range of the store, where this capability exists, it will show up as one of the delivery options that you have. So it's consumer specific, and it's based on where your location is relative to the location of the seller.
So it really stands to, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So it really stands to benefit, like, retailers with a large footprint, because you turn up on more results, right?
It certainly would, but I think it can also benefit even retailers with 1 or 2 local stores. Typically, they're small enough that they may never have been able to offer a BOPIS capability on their own, or they just may not have been able to do it on their own because of their scale. So this allows them to do it in a limited fashion in whatever area they're serving. They can reach consumers in that area and offer this local pickup option through Amazon. So I think it can benefit, really, but you have to have a store, right? You have to have stores, and you have to have the ability to know what inventory is in your stores. And if you can do that, there's a process you still have to go through with Amazon to get approved and whatnot. But if you can do that, then you can become part of this program. And we can, for us, it's just another option for how do you get the product to the consumer. So we can help our sellers, as long as they're approved by Amazon, take advantage of that program.
It's an incredible opportunity, and it's Amazon being innovative again, just moving through the, giving a normally channel, offering really to both shoppers and sellers. Mike, I could go on and on and on, and I have to say this is why I like doing this podcast, just hosting this podcast, because I just bring smart people like yourself. I'm very well versed in multi-channel this time, and I've learned a thing or two around a few things around just multi-channel selling and just predictions in 2022. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here, so thank you very much for having us.
Brilliant. So for listeners looking to follow ChannelAdvisor, it's ChannelAdvisor.com. That's ChannelAdvisor, advisor.com, or just Google them. Are you active yourself on any social media if people want to follow you or follow your work?
Yes, we have a presence on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Brilliant. And then, of course, we have a pretty active blog, so come subscribe to the blog.
We'll link to it all from the show notes. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, thank you.
All right, cheers.
Bye-bye.